I'm John McKegney, and although I've only recently retired to Portrush, Portrush has been part of my life as long as I can remember. Because like many children in the towns and cities of Northern Ireland, from the mid-19th century up until the 1960s, there were two great annual corporate events. Both were preceded by great expectations. One was Christmas and the arrival of Santa, turkey and carols, but the other was the annual Sunday school excursion by steam train to Portrush. For many of the less fortunate, it might be their only day by the seaside all year. Indeed, their only escape from grim, cramped houses and drab streets. Churches across the country organised these outings by booking trains to the coastal resorts for their Sunday school scholars who received free train and refreshment tickets, while their parents, family and friends, as well as the public at large, could buy tickets to travel in the trains at a greatly reduced cost. The refreshment tickets had two tear-off strips, one for a morning refreshment, the other for an afternoon one. Both consisted of bags of sandwiches, white bread, a Paris bun and some sort of little cake. Caterers supplied copious quantities of tea from large teapots containing ready milked and sugared tea. In our case, Barry's generously provided a field behind their arcade for taking the meals. There were sheds for tea boiling and shelter, for in those days it sometimes rained in Portrush. To access the field, it was necessary to pass the delights and distractions of Barry's, which in my earlier days included monkeys to feed and crazy mirrors in which we could laugh at our distorted selves. All good fun, though perhaps not for the monkeys. The anticipation as the day approached grew, but there were important decisions to be made in advance, and perhaps the greatest of these involved boats. Two double choices faced little boys like me. Should my mother buy me a boat in Woolworths and Derry before the big day, or wait until we got to Portrush and avail of the much greater selection on offer in the White House? Toys were along the left-hand side, where the menswear is today. The trouble was that going shopping in the White House used up valuable playing time for sailing the chosen vessel in the paddling pool at the Arcadia. But that was not the only dilemma to be addressed. Was the boat to be a sailing boat or a clockwork one? Each had its appeal. The clockwork ones tended not to last too long when the seawater got into their mechanisms, whereas there was nothing to go wrong with the sailing boats. The snag was you didn't know where they would go in the pool. It wasn't easy being an excited little boy in the 50s. When the day arrived, we bundled into the car to meet our friends at the waterside station, and in later years tried to bag an adult-free compartment in the non-corridor coaches. Coaches, it must be admitted, that had seen better times. There were two long trains in Waterside Station. The slightly shorter one was for Methodists, and it was in the right-hand platform. Ours was for St. Augustine's Church of Ireland and First Derry Presbyterian. It was so long that on some occasions part of it used the second platform after the Methodists had departed, the two sections being coupled together before departure. Such shunting would be a definite no-no today. Excitement mounted, and a close eye was kept on the weather. On one memorable occasion, it was pouring on one side of the train, but dry on the other. Sadly, the meteorological front moved too wet on both sides as we departed. As the powerful Jeep 264 tank locomotive whistled for departure and started to move, a cheer went up as we enjoyed seeing the town we loved so well drift away across the foil. The first stop was at Limavady Junction to pass a regular train. But on one occasion, there were Derry and Belfast-bound trains wanting to pass at the junction. So our non-priority excursion train had to head off up the stump of the old Limavady branch. There we had a great view of the two express trains heading off in opposite directions, before we backed out of the branch onto the main line before heading on to our next stop at Castle Rock. Downhill Beach was a curtain raiser for what lay ahead in Portrush, and then we were plunged into the darkness of 2 tunnels. Those tunnels would prove particularly useful on the way home for teenagers. If you had met someone and you weren't sure about how they felt about you before you entered the tunnels, you knew one way or another before you emerged. It was great fun. After Castle Rock, it was on to Coleraine, but there was a lifting bridge to be crossed first. One year, we were excited. The bridge had been lifted to let a ship through, so the train had to stop. In due course, the lifting part went down and the train could go on. The engine puffed and panted. A column of smoke shot up into the air. The wheels went round and round, but the long, heavy train simply wouldn't move. What was going to happen? Simple. We started off in reverse and went back a mile or 2 and took a run at it. Different times. That got us into Coleraine, where other trains from lesser places like Carrickfergus or Belfast were also waiting to go to the port. No problem for them. They could just go straight on to the Portrush branch, but our engine had to uncouple and run round the train. This was done with great efficiency, and soon it was ready to pull us along the branch. Some younger children were worried as it set off in the reverse direction in case it was going to take us back to Derry. Thankfully, the UTA in this instance knew what it was doing, and we need not have worried as we headed down the branch. The great thrill was the glimpse of the sea at Juniper Hill, and then the expansive view of Sandhills Beach and the sea of the West Strand, now glistening in glorious sunshine as we rolled down the embankment into Portrush Station. I remember the shock I experienced as we arrived one year to find the Portrush Station had lost its great wooden roof. It just looked so bare. We all piled out of the train. I pestered my mother for a penny to print my name on a strip of metal on the big red machine, but her response was, "We'll see, maybe later," as we headed down the side steps straight into Barry's and out to the back for their first refreshments of the day. In Barry's there seemed to be something new every year, but the racers, the dodgems, or bumpers as we called them, and the ghost trains were staple attractions, along with the laughing sailor and the haunted house machines. Outside there was the Peter Pan Railway beside the packed bus station. I was saddened when this wee railway was cut back to allow a car track to be built, a retrogressive move as far as I was concerned. But first there was food to be consumed, so it was out to the back of Barry's. One year I asked my brother if he could have his Paris bun, as he didn't seem to want it. But as I reached for it, he grabbed it and held it aloft to keep it from my hands. As I asked him again, more or less nicely, the matter was settled when a seagull swooped down and took the whole bun out of his hand. My mother said, "Let that be a lesson to both of you." It was. I now keep a wary eye on seagulls when I have food. Anyway, after the refreshments, it was out to sample the delights of Portrush. But there simply wasn't time to sail the boat at the Arcadia paddling pool, eat a huge candy floss, go for a swim on the raft in the harbour, build a few sandcastles, fish in the rock pools at the East Strand, go for a cruise around the skerries on the ambitiously named Queen Elizabeth II, and to use my carefully saved money back in Barry's. In later years, as girls began to become an attraction rather than an irritation, the ghost train and the Sandhills took on a whole new role. And in any case, I needed company for the Castle Rock tunnels. Such memories come flooding back. Sometimes it rained, though mostly my memory is of sunshine. but I still recall the pleasure of being safe in the shelter at East Strand from a downpour. Its glass bricks fascinated me. Rain or sun, wind or calm, soon, too soon, it was time to make our way back to the magnificent black and white timber station, to be told annually by my father about the toast rack tram that used to run to the Giant's Causeway from beside it. He told me it closed the year I was born, as though that was cause and effect. The station was packed with happy but tired people, waiting their turn to board the train. Once again, the Derry Methodist train left before us, though some people had a longer day travelling to Portrush as a Methodist and returning as Church of Ireland or Presbyterian, depending on what part of the train they were in. The station featured a huge departure board with train times and destinations, neatly written in chalk. It was an intriguing guide to assorted parish and Presbyterian churches, gospel halls, meeting houses and assemblies from all over the province. As the train pulled up the bank to Javaran and on to Coleraine, we knew we had a great day out, and we still had the Castle Rock tunnels to enjoy in age-appropriate ways. Even though as a family we'd soon be heading off on our summer holidays, no day would be quite as special as that of the Sunday School excursion to Portrush.